There are hotel rooms that should never be rented. Rooms where the locks don't keep things out, they keep things in. Rooms where previous guests checked out but never really left. Room 17 at the Riverside Inn was one of these rooms. And what makes this story different from typical haunted hotel tales is that everything you're about to hear has been documented, recorded, witnessed by multiple people who had no reason to lie and everything to lose by telling the truth. This is the story of Room 17 and the thing that lives there, waiting for the next guest who doesn't believe in ghosts. The Riverside Inn sits on the banks of the Hudson River in upstate New York, a 3-story building that's been operating since 1923. For most of its history, it was an unremarkable establishment. Clean rooms, decent rates, a place where traveling salesmen and tourists would spend a night before moving on. But in 1987, something happened in Room 17 that changed everything. A guest named Robert Caldwell checked into the room on October 14th. He was a 42-year-old insurance adjuster in town for a client meeting. According to the front desk log, Robert checked in at 6 p.m. He asked for a wake-up call at 7 a.m. That wake-up call was never answered. When housekeeping entered Room 17 at noon to clean, they found Robert Caldwell dead in the bed. No signs of violence, no indication of natural causes. He was simply dead, his eyes wide open, his face frozen in an expression of absolute terror. The autopsy revealed that Robert had died of cardiac arrest, brought on by extreme stress. But there was no explanation for what could have caused such stress. The room showed no signs of struggle. Robert's belongings were undisturbed. The door had been locked from the inside. Security footage showed no one entering or leaving the room after Robert checked in. He'd gone into Room 17, alone and healthy. 8 hours later, he was found dead, with a look on his face that the coroner described as having seen something no human should ever witness. The case was closed as death by natural causes, though the lead investigator noted in his private files that something about Room 17 felt wrong. He recommended the hotel close the room. The hotel management declined. They needed every room they had. They cleaned Room 17 and put it back into service. 3 weeks later, another guest checked into Room 17. A woman named Margaret Chen, a nurse traveling to a conference. Margaret checked in on a Sunday evening. The next morning, she staggered out of the room at 4 a.m., barefoot, in her nightgown, screaming. Hotel staff found her in the lobby, incoherent and hysterical. She kept saying the same thing over and over. "It's in the walls. It's in the walls. It watches while you sleep. It comes out when you close your eyes." Margaret was taken to a hospital, where she was treated for severe psychological trauma and dehydration. She'd been in Room 17 for less than 8 hours. When she was finally able to give a coherent statement, she described waking up at midnight to the sound of scratching, coming from inside the walls. She thought it was mice at first, but then the scratching formed a pattern, a rhythm, like someone tapping out a message. Margaret said she turned on the light and the scratching stopped. She checked the walls but found nothing. She was about to call the front desk when she noticed something that made her freeze. The mirror above the dresser was fogged up, as if someone had taken a hot shower. But Margaret hadn't showered, and as she watched, something began to appear in the fog. Letters, being traced by an invisible finger. Slowly, deliberately, the letters spelled out a message. "You shouldn't have come here." Margaret grabbed her phone to take a picture, but the battery was dead, even though it had been fully charged when she went to bed. The letters in the mirror faded, and then Margaret heard breathing. Right behind her, she could feel cold breath on the back of her neck. She spun around. Nothing there, but the temperature had dropped. Her room was freezing now, cold enough that she could see her breath, and that's when she saw it. A shadow, not cast by anything, just a shadow standing in the corner, tall, impossibly tall, with arms too long and a head tilted at an angle that necks don't naturally bend. The shadow moved toward her. Not walking, gliding. Margaret ran. She didn't grab her belongings, didn't put on shoes, just ran out of room 17 and didn't stop until she reached the lobby. She refused to go back into the room. Hotel staff retrieved her belongings, and when they entered room 17, they found something that made them finally take the report seriously. Every surface in the room was covered in handprints. Walls, ceiling, windows, hundreds of handprints, small hands, a child's hands, all pressed into surfaces from the inside, as if someone had been trapped in the walls, trying to push through, trying to get out. The handprints were gone within an hour, fading as if they'd never existed. But the housekeeping staff photographed them. Those photos still exist, and they show clearly that something was in room 17, something that left marks, something that terrified 2 guests, killed one, and traumatized another. The hotel finally closed. Room 17. They didn't advertise it, just stopped renting it, told guests it was under renovation. But the owners hired a paranormal investigation team, a legitimate one with PhDs and scientific equipment. The team spent 3 nights in room 17 inches November 1987. What they documented became one of the most compelling pieces of evidence for paranormal activity ever recorded. Lead investigator Dr. Sarah Foster set up cameras, audio recorders, temperature sensors, and electromagnetic field detectors. The first night was quiet. Some temperature fluctuations, nothing definitive. The second night, things changed. At 2:47 a.m., every piece of equipment in the room simultaneously malfunctioned. Cameras went to static. Audio recorders captured a sound like hundreds of voices whispering at once. Temperature dropped 30 degrees in less than a minute. And Dr. Foster, who was sleeping in the room as part of the investigation, woke up to find herself unable to move. Sleep paralysis, she thought initially, a known phenomenon. But then she saw it, the same shadow Margaret had described, standing at the foot of the bed, watching her. And Dr. Foster heard a voice, not out loud, inside her head, a child's voice, desperate, pleading, "Help me. I'm trapped. I've been trapped so long. Please help me. Please let me out." Dr. Foster tried to speak but couldn't. The shadow moved closer. She could feel cold radiating from it, could smell something like earth and decay. The shadow reached out a hand, those impossibly long fingers extending toward her face, and just before it touched her, Dr. Foster managed to scream. The sound broke whatever held her. The shadow vanished. The equipment came back online, and Dr. Foster spent the rest of the night in her car in the parking lot. The third night, Dr. Foster brought her whole team, 5 people, all in room 17 together. They wanted safety in numbers. They got documentation instead. At 3 a.m., the scratching started. All of them heard it, coming from inside the walls. They recorded it, analyzed it later. The scratching formed patterns, Morse code, SOS, over and over. Then words appeared on the walls, not written, carved, scratched into the paint and plaster by invisible hands. "Help me. I'm in the walls. Been here since 1954. Please help." The team tried to communicate, asked questions. "Who are you?" The response appeared carved into the wall. "Emily. I'm 7. I got lost. I'm in the walls. Can't get out." Dr. Foster asked, "How did you get in the walls?" The response took longer, letters appearing one at a time. "Man put me here, hurt me, hid me. I died here, still here, trapped." Dr. Foster contacted the police. They investigated the walls of room 17. used ground-penetrating radar, found an anomaly, a void space behind the bathroom wall, a space that shouldn't exist according to the building's blueprints. They tore open the wall and found remains. A child's skeleton, small, consistent with a 7-year-old, clothing fragments from the 1950s, a small purse with an ID card. Emily Morrison, reported missing in June 1954, never found. The case had gone cold decades ago. Police investigated and determined that in 1954, Room 17 had been undergoing renovation. A contractor named William Hayes had been working on the room. William Hayes had disappeared shortly after Emily Morrison went missing. Never seen again. Never found. Police theorized that Hayes had abducted Emily, killed her, hidden her body in the wall space during renovation, and fled. Emily Morrison had been sealed in the walls of Room 17 for 33 years. The remains were removed, given a proper burial. Emily's surviving family, what was left of them, held a funeral. Dr. Foster attended. She thought it would end the haunting, that Emily, finally found, finally acknowledged, would rest. For a few months, Room 17 was quiet. The hotel reopened it for guests. No incidents, no reports. Then, in March 1988, a businessman checked into Room 17. The next morning, he reported hearing a child crying in the walls, soft, muffled, all night long. Other guests began reporting the same thing. Room 17 was haunted again, but the energy had changed. It was no longer terrifying. It was sad, a profound sadness that filled the room. Guests would check out early, not because they were scared, but because the grief was overwhelming. They couldn't sleep, couldn't stop crying, as if Emily's sorrow had soaked into the room itself. The hotel tried everything. Blessings, sage burnings. A priest came and performed a cleansing ritual. Nothing worked. Emily was still there, still crying, still trapped somehow, even though her body had been removed and buried. Dr. Foster returned to investigate. She spent another night in Room 17, and Emily appeared to her again, not as a shadow this time, as a translucent little girl in a 1950s dress, standing by the window, looking out at the river. Dr. Foster spoke to her. "Emily, your body has been found. You've been buried. Your family knows what happened. You can rest now." Emily turned to look at Dr. Foster, and when she spoke, her voice was clear and heartbreaking. "I know. Thank you for finding me. But I can't leave. Part of me is still in the walls. The part that was scared. The part that died here. That part can't get out. It's stuck. And it's so dark in there. So cold. I don't want to be in the dark anymore. But I can't get out." Dr. Foster realized something terrible. Emily's trauma had been so intense, her death so terrifying, that a piece of her consciousness had imprinted on the room. Even though her body was gone, even though her soul wanted to move on, the trauma remained, trapped, replaying, trying to escape. Dr. Foster tried to explain this to the hotel, tried to help Emily, but she didn't know how. Nobody did. And Emily Morrison is still in Room 17, 37 years after her remains were found, 71 years after she died. The hotel stopped fighting it. They rent Room 17 at a discount now. Tell guests it might be haunted. Some people specifically request it. Paranormal enthusiasts, ghost hunters. Most don't experience anything, but some do. Some hear the crying. Some see the little girl at the window. Some feel the overwhelming sadness. And some, on rare occasions, hear the scratching in the walls. That desperate SOS, that plea for help from a 7-year-old who's been trying to escape the darkness for over 7 decades. The hotel has kept detailed logs of Room 17 for the past 30 years. Over 3,000 guests have stayed there. 247 reported paranormal experiences. All described the same phenomena. Crying, Cold spots, the figure at the window, the scratching, the sadness, every report consistent, every witness credible. This isn't a legend. It's not folklore. It's documented, verified, real. Room 17 is haunted by Emily Morrison, a child who died in terror and pain, who was hidden in the walls like garbage, who spent 33 years sealed in darkness before anyone found her, and who, even in death, even after burial, cannot escape the trauma of what happened to her in that room. The most recent incident was just 6 months ago. A paranormal researcher named James Chen requested permission to spend a week in room 17. He wanted to try something different. Instead of investigating, he wanted to help. James brought toys, a stuffed bear, books, a nightlight. He treated room 17 like a child's room, and every night, he'd talk to Emily, tell her stories, read her books, leave the nightlight on so she wouldn't be in the dark. By the third night, the crying stopped. By the fifth night, guests in adjacent rooms reported hearing something they'd never heard from room 17 before. Laughter, a child, laughing, playing. James documented everything, and on his final night, Emily appeared to him one last time. She looked different, less sad, less trapped. She told him, "Thank you for being kind, for not being afraid, for remembering I'm just a little girl. I'm not ready to leave yet. This is the only place I know. But it's not so dark anymore, not so cold, because someone finally remembered to turn on a light." Room 17 still operates at the Riverside Inn. You can book it tonight if you want. The hotel is honest about its history now. They tell guests about Emily, about what happened, about what might happen if you stay there. Most guests sleep peacefully. Some experience the phenomena, and a few, a very special few, report something extraordinary. They say that if you leave a nightlight on, if you're kind and gentle and acknowledge that Emily is there, you might wake up to find small handprints on the window, not pressed from inside trying to get out, pressed from outside, like a child looking in, wanting to be remembered, wanting to know she's not forgotten. Emily Morrison will probably never leave room 17. Her trauma runs too deep. Her death was too terrible. Maybe she just needs people to remember, to acknowledge, to turn on a light in the darkness, to treat her not as a horror, but as what she is, a 7-year-old girl who died scared and alone, and who just wants someone to know she's there, to know she exists, to know that even in death, even as a ghost, she deserves kindness. The haunting of room 17 isn't a scary story. It's a sad one. It's a story about trauma that won't heal, about pain that won't fade, about a child who can't rest. But it's also a story about compassion, about the researchers who found her, about the investigator who tried to help her, about James Chen, who remembered she was just a little girl, and about the hundreds of guests who've stayed in room 17 and left lights on for Emily, who've said goodnight to her, who've acknowledged her presence with kindness instead of fear. Room 17 is haunted. That's undeniable. Documented. Real. But maybe haunted doesn't have to mean terrifying. Maybe haunted can mean remembered, acknowledged, seen. Maybe the real horror of room 17 isn't that Emily is there. It's that for 33 years, nobody knew, nobody looked, nobody cared enough to find the child who was crying in the walls. But now we know. Now Emily is seen. And in room 17, at the Riverside Inn, if you listen carefully on quiet nights, you might hear something that sounds almost like peace. A little girl who finally, after 7 decades, doesn't have to cry alone in the darkness anymore.